There is nothing worse than untapped potentials. If you know that you're made for more, this is the place. I know that every successful person I've ever met has one thing in common. They do not let themselves fall victim to their circumstances. They figure out a way to rise above it. So join me on this journey where I help you to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business. If you're feeling stuck and you're needing some practical tools, some hope to get you to that better life, this is definitely the place for you. Hey everybody, welcome to the UNSTUCK Podcast. And today I get a chance to interview my new friend, Beth Smeeton. Girl, you are somebody that we totally connected right away when we first met. You are in the Midwest with me in Chicago, and you are an intuitive, okay, so how do I say this again?
Intuitive eating life coach.
How cool is that? Like, that's so fancy. And I want to hear all about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that means, how you help people? Give me like a really good view of you on top of the mountain right now.
Sure. So intuitive eating life coach. So essentially I help women heal their relationship with food. So whether that's from an extreme of restricting or an extreme of overeating and binging, we find that happy medium in between. And I help them listen to their body so they don't need to diet and understand any underlying issues that come with restricting or overeating behavior. So really taking the shame out of that behavior and just slowing down and finding out what's really going on so that she can solve for that and then feel free around food and no longer have to diet or feel restricted by any of those rules.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, my passion is really just to be better, right? Be our best version of ourselves, to do better, to show up in the world the best way that we can, and to have better, have the best life that we can imagine for ourselves. And I can only imagine, right? When you're stuck in this mind game of letting food control your life, you're not able to be the best version of yourself because you're basically having to be a victim to that mindset. And then you're going to have a hard time showing up for others because your excess energy is essentially expended on trying to keep that contained. And if you have that anxiety or that holding over you or just that pressure over you, you're not going to be living out the best life that you have. And so I think that that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think that it's so funny how we can self-sabotage ourselves in so many ways. And food is something that we can't ignore, right?
Yeah,
so I can say like, oh, I'm an alcoholic, but I just won't drink any alcohol, but you can't not eat. And so it's something that is so important to address if it's something that you find is holding you back in some way. So tell me how the heck you got to be so passionate about this.
Yeah, so great question. So I struggled with disordered eating for 20 years myself. Okay. And I knew something was wrong, but it was under the disguise of I was being healthy. I thought I was being healthy and doing everything right because diet culture teaches us essentially that counting your calories and tracking all your food and weighing yourself, that's normal. But now I know that it isn't. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. But I struggled myself and also was either super restricting or also binge eating. So I knew something was off. And then I started actually working with clients, macro coaching. And if you don't know what that is,
explain that.
It's extreme form of tracking. So like weighing your food, weighing your body every day, like making sure you're eating enough grams of carbs, grams of protein. It's very detailed and pretty disordered behavior. But at the time, I didn't realize that it was. It was like, oh, I can eat whatever I want. This feels free. So at the time, I was helping women with that. And what's interesting is that when a close friend of mine came to work with me from college, I was like, wait, something doesn't feel right. It's almost like I equate it to, I don't have kids, but I imagine once we have children, if we imagine them like weighing their food and tracking their food, it's like, we wouldn't want to teach them these behaviors.
Yeah.
So once I realized, oh, wait, I don't want to teach other women these behaviors. This isn't right. That was a light bulb for me where it was like, okay, I need to look into this for myself. This isn't right. Like that I had to lean into the fear of gaining weight. That was a really big issue for me. I put a lot of my self-worth in my body size, which is what was causing this disordered eating behavior.
Yeah.
I was using diets as a coping mechanism. I wasn't really paying attention to what I was thinking or how I was feeling. I didn't understand all of that. So that's where I felt stuck. And then I went and got a master's certification in life coaching. So
Okay.
that is what really opened my eyes to, oh, okay, I can choose to think and believe whatever I want. These stories and narratives that I've been telling myself that my worth is tied to my body, that's not true. I don't need to believe that. So that is what fully changed my whole life. And then now my business reflects that and I help women do the same. So it's come.
That is amazing. And I think that one of the things that stood out to me when you were talking is an obsessive behavior, right? So I think that what you thought was being like extra healthy and extra fit it sounds like an obsession. And anytime we get on one extreme or the other is where we get off balance, right? And we start to kind of shift that focus. And so what I love about your story too, Beth, is that you were able to identify and have this awareness of yourself to figure out where does that obsession come from in the first place. And, you know, so much of our own self-worth comes from our body image, and the limiting beliefs that we have from when we're kids can completely affect the way that we show up in the world, the way that we behave. And so tell us a little bit more about that. I would love to hear more about how you've been able to take your own journey and learn more about the brain and learn more about our self-worth and all of the things that tie to it.
Yeah, great question. And it all is tied. So our relationship with food, our relationship with our body, and our relationship with ourselves, it's all tied together, where when we work through how we think and how we believe, we can decide to think new things. So with me, my body image struggles started when I was 16. And it was, I went on my first diet when I was 16 and, you know, kind of went down that path. And when I got my own coach was through this life coaching certification. How I identified what my root underlying issue was the stories that I heard when I was growing up from my mom. And that isn't to say there's no blame or anything. This is, you know, my mom was sharing her experience about her life and her body, but I took that and internalized and made it mean so much more about me. And for instance, what my story is my mom is smaller than I am. And so she would say comments about how, you know, a specific weight that she was and how that was too heavy for her. And then, you know, over time, she found her natural set point weight and it was way less than mine. So I took that and meant, oh, then my body is wrong. My body's too big. These are all subconscious thoughts that I was thinking though.
Right.
And I took that into really internalizing my worth with the size of my body. And once I had the awareness that it came from my mom and it was my mom's story, I was like, oh, I don't need to hold on to the story anymore. That's not mine.
Yeah.
So that was a very big healing awareness.
That is so interesting. And one of the things that I've learned about the brain as well is that we oftentimes will take on these truths that we think that we have, even by the time we're 7 years old. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that our brain is not developed enough to be able to take the whole picture in. It just takes the parts that we can process at the time. And our brain, especially when we're 7 years old or younger, doesn't have the ability to reject something as not truth, right? And so even as a 16-year-old, you were smarter than you were at 7, but your brain was still developing and it couldn't take that whole context of, hey, I'm way taller than my mom, or I just have a different body frame than my mom. And instead, you know, that was a truth that you had. And sometimes we don't even realize it. Like you said, was it something that you found was just kind of buried in your subconscious that you never even knew where that came from?
Exactly. And it didn't even cross my mind that accepting my body was an option. I think that's really important too, is a lot of us believe that, oh, when I accept my body and I accept my size, then I'm just going to let myself go and I'm going to like go off the rails. Yes. And I think it's so important to point out that actually the opposite happens. is when we accept, then we can respect our body, love our body, and we end up taking care of ourselves way, way better than when we don't accept.
Oh my gosh. And that's so true with just anything in life in general. That was one of the things that I struggled with in my brain is how could I be content and be ambitious at the same time? And it really comes down to this like secret sauce of being grateful for what I have, right? So we're honoring our bodies. We're being grateful that it works. We are feeling grateful that we have two legs that allow us to walk around the world. We have eyes that can see, ears that can hear, and then be excited for what our potential is.
Yeah. Our bodies are home. Like we all were, some of us for so long, maybe even our whole lives, reject our home.
Yeah.
It's like we don't need to do that.
And one of the things too that I've noticed is that, you know, what we say in our self-talk is so powerful. And it's like, oh my goodness, Lachelle, would you say what you just said to yourself to your best friend or to your daughter? Would you want anybody to hear those thoughts if they could? And if not, then I really have to start reframing the way that I talk to myself and reprogramming those limiting beliefs and those subconscious beliefs that I've had for my whole life. And the other thing, what you bring up is so important as a mom. I do have a daughter. And one of the things that I've noticed about my own life is that my mom struggled with her own self-image. And my sister and I both struggled with our self-image. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I have to fix this before my daughter follows in our footsteps. And so that realization that the way that I talk about myself, the way that I talk about food, the way that I talk about fitness, and how I can reframe it both for myself and for the little eyes that are watching me.
Let me ask you this. Are you a business owner and you feel like you are literally tied to your phone all the time in order to keep up with social media? You know you need to post consistently, but you don't know what to post, and you don't want to have to post every single day because it means that you're married to your phone. So then you're not consistent, and then business doesn't follow. Or maybe you have no idea how to attract your ideal client, and you want to find a way to get the right people to come to you. Oh my goodness, like that was totally where I was. And I had to take some time and research to find out what the heck I could be doing to make my life so much better. So here's a scoop. I have found a system that I've created a system that has allowed me to not only attract my dream clients, but it's allowed me to be consistent by planning all of my content for an entire year in one single weekend. And I've decided to offer it to all of you guys. If that is something that you would love to learn more about, make sure to click on the link in the show notes so that you can learn how to get your life back, but keep your social media game on track.
So what, Beth, what tips would you give somebody who can relate to some of this? Maybe they have struggled with one extreme or the other when it comes to food, or maybe they've just recognized like, I got something inside of me that is really affecting my self-worth. What would you say to that person who's listening today who really needs to hear this?
Yeah. So first, you're not alone, and it's okay, first and foremost. And my number one thing is to take a moment and self-reflect and slow down. I think journaling is one of the best tools you can use. So I like to, when I first start working with women, it's just do a brain dump. Just like get whatever is in your mind onto paper and see what's happening there. And notice, just like you were saying, would I be saying any of these things to a friend, someone I love? And usually the answer is no.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it's then starting to say, okay, I can intentionally choose to continue to believe these thoughts, or I can start thinking new ones. And that's not to say, oh, now just start saying positive affirmations. It's more like, I like to describe this work as like learning a new language, because it takes practice, it takes patience. So start to then at the same time, like imagine, like suspend any of the current behaviors of like struggling with self-worth or disordered eating. Start to think about your future and what your life might look like without that behavior. Like what might you be thinking, doing, feeling, and really allow yourself to play and imagine and go there. And once you do that, then you have your roadmap to be like, oh, okay, So these are the thoughts that are available to me right now. I don't have to be, completely healed or completely, loving myself to start thinking this now. So it's really fun to know that we can build our own roadmap and start to think new things.
I've never ever thought about it like that. So thank you. It's just really where you say, even if I'm not in the place that I want to be yet, I can still have those thoughts right now. I love that.
Yeah,
like I've never thought about it that way.
We can think whatever we want.
Yeah. And so why not choose the one that's going to make me feel good? And, one of the things that just popped into my head too is I actually talked about this to my kids when it comes to our faith. So when we talk about going to church and stuff, and I'm like, for me, I try to explain to my kids that I don't want you to do the right thing because you're going to be in trouble or you think you're going to go to hell or all of the things. I want you to do things because you love me and you want to do things because you love me, or you want to do things because you love Jesus so much that you want to do those things for him because you love him, not because you're worried about getting in trouble. And I think that when it comes to our bodies, we have to say the same thing, right? Like, I think that sometimes we put ourselves down in our negative self-talk because we're trying to kind of pound our way into good behavior. Like, oh my gosh, Lachelle, you're so lazy. You didn't take the stairs today or whatever, right? And so we think that that's going to motivate us into better behavior, but really it just makes us feel worse about ourselves, right? But if we can say to ourselves, like, I want you to do this because you love your body and you're grateful for your body and you want to show your body that you love it. And we reframe it into a positive instead of trying to beat ourselves down into behavior through negative shaming. I think that we can really start to turn that around a little bit. And I think that one of the things that you said too that really stood out to me was, if you imagine who you want to be, what does that feel like? What does that look like when you're there? And then we start showing up as that person in all the tiniest little decisions that we have each day.
Yeah.
I literally have the choice. Yeah. Like I get it out of my car in the ramp. I have the choice to hit the elevator button or I have the choice to take the stairs. That little tiny choice. Well, Lachelle, what would that person that you're trying to become, what would they decide right now? Well, I think she would decide to take the stairs. And then that's one tiny little step closer to becoming the woman that I want to be, because I'm making tiny little choices that are consistent with what she would make.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And even with another important part is to understand that we are more than our body. And that's where the self-worth piece comes in, and where, okay, who am I really? Who's my soul? What does my soul feel like, look like, sound like? And who is she? Like, is she a good person? What does she do for others? Like, what are her dreams and desires? And when you start to connect to that soul of you, that truth of you, the body piece, it's like our bodies are our home, but our soul never changes. And once we start to connect to that, like our truth, then it's like, oh, okay, all this pressure can just melt away, because we don't need to look a certain way in order to prove like, oh, I'm good enough, or I'm lovable, all those things.
And so we're consistent, like we're already whole. I tell myself that in my affirmations every day. I'm already whole. And so if we can think about that, it'll help us to recognize that we're already whole, whether we're at our lowest weight or our highest weight, whether we have youthful skin or wrinkles, right? Because our body will change. We live in a fallen world with gravity and time and all the things, but our soul is consistent, and it's already whole and it's already beautiful. And so, taking care of our body that adorns that soul because we love it is one thing, right? But to define ourselves by it is another.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, this is probably, late in the conversation, but you mentioned disordered eating, and I never really had you basically define that. What does that mean to you?
It means to me where it's like that spectrum of either completely restricting yourself, meaning not honoring your hunger. So if you're hungry, thinking, oh, I shouldn't eat, or I just ate, or what's wrong with me? And thinking, oh, I can only eat this certain amount because that's what I learned that I should. So when you're restricting yourself from your own body's hunger, that's one end.
Okay.
And then the other end is when you're, for lack of a better term, almost punishing yourself and eating beyond fullness through overeating or to the extreme binge eating.
Okay.
So those are the two extremes. And then there can be nuances in between for sure. But.
So basically what you're doing is you teach people how to listen to your body.
How to listen, honor it, trust it.
Yeah. So if I'm hungry, proving to myself that I can fast until 2 p.m. today is not really necessarily doing what I can do to treat my body well. But listening to my body and saying, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat, and then eating, just listening, slowing down, eating to the point of being full, being satisfied.
Yes.
Right. And then following those cues. But also what you do is you take it a step further, it sounds like, and you bring the brain into it. Because if you are listening to your body, but you don't trust your body yet, right? You're going to worry, you're going to let fear take over, and you're going to worry that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to control myself. Talk to me about that language that goes on in our heads when fear takes over.
Well, the fear usually is like, oh my God, I'm going to gain weight if I listen to my hunger, if I listen to my body. Typically what happens is we're so conditioned to believe that everything outside of us has the correct way to eat. So what to eat, how much to eat, when to eat, we learn all these rules. So when we take those rules away and then we learn how to listen and trust our body, then I even forgot what I was going to say.
We were talking about fear. We were talking about fear.
Oh, fear. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so fear usually comes from when I listen to my body, I'm going to go off the rails. And so it's kind of like what I was mentioning earlier with it's almost like that all or nothing mentality.
Yeah.
So many of us think I'm either going to be super on a diet or on with my healthy behaviors, or I'm off.
Yeah.
So since the experience of being off is almost that YOLO mentality of I'm just going to do whatever, I'm going to eat whatever I want, who cares? And so it's that narrative of who cares, either it doesn't matter, or I'm going to start over on Monday, or, I'm fat, so whatever. It's those narratives that go on. And so it's understanding and seeing how that fear of when I'm in that YOLO mentality, I go off the rails. But what's really happening is you're saying these things I'm just going to start over on Monday or start over tomorrow. And that triggers overeating behavior. So it's not the food, it's not addiction, it's not, because you don't have enough willpower or discipline. It all comes back to what you're telling yourself. And then that triggers the overeating. So I think that is such an important point where so many people think that they're addicted to food or they have no willpower or self-discipline. And it's not about that. So understanding the brain, what you're thinking, that's what's so important. Be okay, it is what I'm thinking, and food is neutral, and I can trust myself and I can trust my body. And it just allows everything to be more calm, grounded, and effortless.
Okay. So let's just say that the person who's listening to this right now is okay, well, I've already told myself that today. I was going to get up early and work out and I didn't. I pushed snooze instead. Now, I'll just start tomorrow. And, since I'm not going to work out tomorrow, then until tomorrow, I'll start my diet tomorrow. What do you tell the person who's literally listening to this right now and they feel like they're in that space where they just keep self-sabotaging themselves from starting to do something better, be better, do better, have better?
Yes. So the first thing I'd want to uncover is the pressure around that. Usually when we put pressure around starting something tomorrow, or if exercise needs to be an hour, or you need to lift weights, or whatever you're telling yourself that it needs to look like, that's a lot of pressure. So when we remove those limits, how long it's going to be, what activity it's going to be, and just feel into, okay, a walk sounds good, or if you like lifting weights, or yoga, whatever it is, remove the limits and just allow yourself to play. Similar to the future self, bringing play into this will remove the pressure and be okay, this is fun. All of this is to add to our lives and bring fun and joy to our lives, and not this heavy pressure of like,
Yeah.
it should look a certain way. So
Yeah.
I would say remove the pressure.
I love that. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a little bit about how our environment has impacted our ability to be able to trust our brain. So, for example, I've learned that cocaine and sugar are literally like one molecule away from each other. And so we have, I think it's cocaine, it might be heroin, I don't remember. It's one of these drugs, right? So it allows us to literally have a physiologic craving for sugar. And therefore then like we can sometimes not be able to trust our body because our body is trying to deceive ourselves because we're still human. Any thoughts on how to combat those kind of things?
Yeah. So even I like tell the women I work with too, like let go of that story about sugar being as bad as cocaine or heroin. That's like, that will even further and deepen the belief of sugar is bad. I shouldn't be eating this. This is wrong. Why do I have these cravings? And like shaming ourselves for having sugar cravings when we're human and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's totally okay to have something sweet every day. And I think when we also allow that to be normal and normalize that behavior, that pressure goes away. And it's like, and also understanding the narrative of, I shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. Don't do this. That's going to trigger overeating. I'm going to be good again tomorrow. So it's that same starts with the brain affects the behavior.
I love that. I think it all comes back to balance again, right? Like my kids, I right now, as we record this, have a 12-year-old who literally, if he found a bag of Snickers, he would eat the whole stinking bag. Like he doesn't have any control. And so I laugh about this because I'm like, dude, like where'd all that candy go? But it's, you know, looking back at it, like it's okay to have, you know, a fun size Snickers every day after your meal. If that brings you joy, it's just don't have the whole bag.
Right? Yeah. And it's understanding, okay, if you are eating the whole bag, what's going on there? Yeah. What is there? And, you know, not with a child, but I'll say speaking for adults, like if you're eating the whole bag, what's happening in your life where it's either, are you getting triggered by not giving yourself enough permission to eat the sugar? That's one thing.
Yeah.
Or are you coping with or numbing or hiding or avoiding something else that could be going on? So that's the two areas that I would look at.
Oh my goodness, Beth, I've learned so much today and you've given me so much. You've inspired me to take care of my body and to love my body. And it's okay to go with it. And it's okay to just embrace that we have all these things in our world that we can enjoy in balance and to love ourselves. And so thank you so much. I'm going to make sure that everybody has all of the access to you in the show notes. So all of your social handles and anything else that you want to share so that people can get in touch with you if they're like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to Beth. And so we'll definitely make sure that we have that in there. And I always ask my guests to give our audience one question to ponder that's going to help them to move forward and get unstuck.
One question to ponder. So I would bring that back to the future self. So what do I want my life to look like? That simple question and allowing yourself to believe that you can have that.
Yeah.
And going from there. That's huge in everything, so that, you know, like this is just my circumstance now, but I can choose and start to get myself unstuck by just dreaming and playing by what I want to be experiencing instead.
Oh my goodness. I love that. And then just to go off of that, I'm going to piggyback and say, you guys, think about where your life will be 5-10 years down the road if you don't do anything. And really just think about that and think like, you know what? No, I deserve more than that. Like, this is something that I really do want to give myself today, myself this gift today. So Beth, thank you so much for sharing your heart, your vulnerability, and all of your wisdom. You've been such a blessing.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun.
Yay. Thank you so much for listening to the UNSTUCK Podcast. I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you. And don't forget to check out the show notes if you want to get into my private club, the Better Club, to be able to learn better ways to be better, do better, and have better. So until next time, keep showing up. Let's get unstuck together. Have a great day.